Luisa Neubauer, thanks so much for joining us. You've achieved a big victory in the courts in Germany, and the government has responded quickly by changing their targets. Are you satisfied with their new commitments?
No, I think that wouldn't be appropriate. After all, this isn't about what satisfies me or anyone else, but this is about governments aligning the climate policies to the science and to Paris. And the court in Germany ruled that the government needs to listen to the science and, stick to the Paris Agreement, because it didn't do so in the past. And now they did agree, in fact, on higher targets, but they're still in line with Paris. So, of course, we're going to keep fighting here.
So what more immediate actions do you want to see from the government?
Well, there is a tendency these days to replace climate action with setting climate targets, but targets cannot replace action. So what the government does, and I think this accounts for quite a few countries, is that they set even higher targets, again and again and again, while in the present they, block actions that would allow them to reach those targets in the first place. So what we need is government acting here and now to effectively and sustainably and just reduce emissions so that any kind of target can be reached. And then, of course, we need to, in the long run, adjust ourselves to what is needed for 1.5.
Well, yes, and the targets they've set, some people say, are very ambitious. So what kind of action is needed? What measures need to happen to try and make those reductions?
Well, of course, in general, that is up to scientists and, the expert, the scientists for future, for instance, to advise on. But what is kind of crystal clear right now is that as long as the German government is sticking to a coal exit by 2038, something is going wrong. Some of the biggest sources of CO2 in Europe are based in Germany. In fact, 6 of them are based in Germany. This is our coal power plants, which are wrecking the climate and which could go off the network much sooner than 2038. That's what experts agree on widely. Then there is a gas pipeline, Nord Stream 2, which, Germany is currently finishing right now. A new gas pipeline of that dimension in 2021, that's simply absurd. And there are a number of other things about new roads being built, about the government actually preventing new investments in renewables. And all those things, when you look at them closely, they just don't add up. And it's good and nice to have, big speeches about everyone wanting to do Paris Agreement action together. But if you look closely and molecules don't lie, it doesn't work out.
So when we're talking about targets, then, the UK government has also set ambitious targets. They're going to be hosting the climate summit COP26 later this year. So do you think they're doing the right thing in leading the way and showing the way for the rest of the world?
Well, I think it's not up to me to judge the UK climate policies, but what I've heard from experts in the UK, of course, is that there are plenty of things that don't add up either. It's a great victory that a new coal project was prevented, by activists and others. But I feel, right now when we look at it, and there are plenty of reports proving that. Especially those very emission-intensive countries in the global north, who not just have an emission responsibility, but also a huge historical responsibility, they are not keeping up to what they're in charge of right now. And I do very much wonder, who else is there? Who are we expecting to rise up first if it isn't those who have caused the climate crisis in the first place and are now very well equipped and rich enough and industrialized enough to, get rid of fossil fuels as soon as possible, and not just, when it kind of works out politically.
The changes that have happened in Germany have come about because you went to court and you won. So is litigation the best way to make changes rather than street activism?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put this in some kind of hierarchy here. What we see is that we need to try everything we can. And so I would rather understand this as a huge puzzle. And, litigation is one piece of that puzzle, and street action, climate action, civil disobedience, working inside institutions, that are different puzzles. And, ideally, eventually, they come up together and they add up and they produce that kind of pressure and awareness that we so desperately need. I mean, I feel, this litigation victory was huge, but we cannot solve the climate crisis court case by court case, simply because, these court systems work very, very slowly. It took over a year for the court to decide that a climate target that was decided in 2019 isn't ambitious enough. So I feel, we need to also understand that these climate cases, these litigation cases, they can provide a foundation for our work as activists to then come back to that and actually demand our rights to be turned into politics. Because that's actually what the court said, is we have a fundamental right to climate justice. And that is big, but we know that we're not getting anything for free here. We're going to fight for it. We have to fight for it. And we have to demand that the government actually sticks to what the court decided.
And you are fighting on different fronts, aren't you? Because as well as the court case, you've been helping organise the school strikes in Germany. How did you first get started in that? What first motivated you to get involved?
Well, I never planned to become a climate activist, simply because I thought that governments in the 21st century would get things done. And I mean, the science is there and we see what the climate crisis does today. And I thought, there were people who were aware of all that and would sort things out, by the end of the day. And when I found out a couple of years after the Paris Agreement was signed, what was happening around the world and also in Germany, how governments were just failing so badly to stick what they themselves committed to do, I got very irritated and angry, and by coincidence or so, I ended up at the climate conference in Poland in 2018, and I ran into Greta Thunberg, and apparently she was the only one who acted like we were in a crisis on this UN climate conference. And so I went back home and was like, okay, I think we need to do something, and I think I need to do something. And I felt it was something way out of my comfort zone to start climate activism on the street and to start organizing. I thought systems would just work out and eventually solve those problems. And it was a very terrifying experience to see that this might not happen, and we will have to start taking ourselves seriously here and do whatever we can.
And do you think it's made a difference? Are opinions changing in Germany about climate change, do you think?
Well, again, I think there's not about what I think or so, but what we see is that studies are proving that people are definitely, becoming much more aware and what the climate crisis does today, that it exists today, and that things need to change much quicker. Otherwise, a climate crisis will do those changes for us. And what we also see, of course, we are just 5 months before a major election here. The general election in Germany is happening soon, and we see that the vibes around the climate crisis are unprecedented. There are majorities in this country who say that they will go and vote in the favor of the climate. I think that is pretty big. But again, that is one part of the puzzle piece, and yet what we still need is this kind of action, the kind of effective emission reduction, and obviously people everywhere starting to become part of the solution.
Well, yes, and you say, talk about the election, as you say, it's a few months away, but the Green Party is doing well in the polls, isn't it? Do you think that a chancellor from Die Grünen is realistic?
Well, we never had any kind of election like this where actually, there were the Greens, putting forward a chancellor candidate. By the end of the day, this isn't up to a particular chancellor, no matter from which party, but this is about a broad consensus that we need on 1.5-degree politics. And this needs to be, bipartisan. We need parties in the entire democratic spectrum in Germany to understand that this isn't a question if we do climate actions or what kind of climate action we do. That is where we need to have the debate. And this one election won't solve the climate action that is needed in Germany. Ideally, we end up with an election result that can, again, provide a foundation for further work that needs to be done. And that is not a single person that will change it, but it's rather the general, the vibe, the attention on the issue.
And how far would you take your environmental fight? Would you take it into politics? Would you run for office?
Well, I think I decided I want to do everything I can to to fight for climate justice wherever this is most effective. And what we see right now is that activism, any kind of activism, can change everything. And so as an activist, I see that, this is needed much more. Maybe at some point we get to a stage where I feel, okay, my work as an activist on the street and the movement isn't as needed anymore, maybe, as it could be somewhere else. And then maybe we need to chat again. But, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, what would you do in 5 years? I would have never imagined to do what I do right now. So I've grown very conscious about making any assumptions about my future.
Keeping your options open.
Well, yes, that as well.
OK, Luisa Neubauer, really good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.